Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I'm a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on December 5th, 2021 at approximately 5:28 p.m. PST. Well, I had an interesting conversation today. Now, bearing in mind that whether people want and choose to believe in it or whether they don't is not the issue. Whether or not you believe in the whole Christmas issue or where it came from, the origins of Christmas, the origins of the whole holiday season that is there. How it came to be is not nearly as important as what we do with it. Now, I will absolutely admit, and acknowledge the fact that it has become way too materialistic in this world. Okay, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Hebrew, it doesn't matter. I don't even know if Hebrew works anymore. But even, it doesn't matter where you come from on this planet. The one thing I have seen consistently is around this time of year, for whatever reason, people seem to try to be a little nicer to each other. Okay, it was fascinating because the conversation I had today, the individual I was talking to, he flat out told me he did not believe in the whole Christmas thing, but he literally told me, I don't want to, I do not desire to, to pick a fight or to he used the word disparage your views. But he said, I personally don't believe it. Right? But he says, you know, I'm not worried about it. He said, I don't celebrate it, but that's me. And he gave me a whole lot of reasons, and here's what it boiled down to. Whether Christmas is real, whether it is something that is made up along the way, whether or not it is based on something in reality or something of a different religion than what it's claimed to. There's a lot of things that are wrong with it. I have my own belief structure, but the one big thing I will agree with, as I've mentioned before, I came back to this world, back to this life with one primary goal, to encourage people to realize that we really can make this a better world when we all choose to work together. Now, this is not going to make it better for everybody. Lord knows that the whole Christmas thing has gone into a real odd skew. Okay, people are putting way too much weight on the toys, on the presents, on the flashing lights, on all of this. It's become far too materialistic in my life. In my opinion, way too materialistic. Now, to be clear, do I celebrate Christmas? Absolutely. But I look at it this way. Okay, we are entering a season here where all of the materialism aside, people they do their part to try and make this a better world, to try and get along a little better. Would that people would do that the year round, but that does not seem to be the case. The most bizarre setup I ever heard of was, if I remember my history correctly, and history itself, as we all know, is written by the victors. But my understanding is back in World War One, on December 25th, okay, there was no ceasefire issued. No, no head of the military, no political heads, nobody said don't shoot. And yet, on that day, both sides on the front lines, the Axis and the Allies, stopped fighting. They crossed the no man's land and met in the middle. There, they sang Christmas carols in various languages. They exchanged gifts, albeit many times it was nothing more or something as phenomenal as ammunition, some clothing, some foodstuffs. Right, now foodstuffs being for the most part sea rations. But here's the thing that doesn't make sense. Nobody told them to stop fighting. Everybody stopped. They met across the middle of that great divide. And they sat down and they had Christmas dinner together, right smack in the middle of a war. Now, here's the thing that doesn't make sense. Why, when they ended the fight, just like that, they just quit. What stopped them from fighting? What was it? What energy? What belief structure? What entity? Whatever. What stopped them from fighting for that one day? And the most bizarre thing of all, why did they turn around and start fighting the following day? There had been no ceasefire. They just quit. They went, they got to talk to each other. They exchanged gifts. They shared a meal. They said their prayers. They went back to their respective sides and opened fire the following morning. Now, whether you believe in it or not is not the relevant factor. And unfortunately, my understanding is that the last of the survivors of World War One has now passed away. But we talk about this thing called Remembrance Day. Okay, remembering our fallen, remembering those that went before. Okay, it may be wise to remember the fact that they too, right in the middle of the worst time in history for them, especially for them, they put down their arms, they walked across dead man, no man's land, and they broke bread together. They had a meal, they had some enjoyment, and they carried on. Why not do the same thing? Now, I got accused quite some time back now of aiming at striving a cult and striving to start a cult. That worked out well. Now, I was literally told it's people like me suggesting people like you get along. Start looking at the positive side of things. Start getting along. Put your weapons down. Put your anger down. Put your prejudice aside. And start getting along. Now, I was literally told by somebody one day that was called starting a cult. So here's the thing. If it's a cult that is necessary to start to bring all of you together under one roof, to take all of your religious beliefs, all of your spiritual beliefs, and say, okay, we're all aiming for the same thing. People on the whole have parents. This is why I call you all children. Okay, heck, I called my own father a child. And if you had parents, even if you didn't know them, even if you were born in a test tube, okay, doesn't matter. You had parents. There's somebody came before you that that shall we say gave birth to you, sired you, spawned you, whatever you will. Okay, you're all born. You all go through various things. You all die. Granted, some lifetimes are longer than others, but we all require food, drink, a sense of belonging, a sense of acceptance. We desire to be respected. The catch is, if you desire to be respected, it is absolutely imperative that you remember to respect the people around you. Now, let's be clear. I'm not talking about respect your elders. I'm referring to respect everyone. Because if an elder is not respecting you, I'll tell you it's going to be really hard to respect that elder. This is where a lot of the complications are coming from when you start looking at the politicians that are out there. They're trying to run a country. Politicians are critical for survival of a society. Every single individual on the planet, however, is a politician. You're negotiating for what you desire. You're striving to get ahead, striving to protect your family. This is not an easy job. However, when politicians are making laws that they're not following themselves, okay, this does not lend for respect. They're not respecting you, therefore you don't respect them. It's a real vicious circle. Now, it's got to start somewhere. So here's a place to start, and you can call this a cult if you'd like. Okay, the place to start is respecting yourself. Hence, the first karmic law. Be true to yourself first. Okay, the second one falls right hand in hand with it. The first one really boils down to taking a look in the mirror and going, what am I content with? What is making me content? What is encouraging me to look at the next day and go, I can do something a little different? Okay, that's where you start. Then you look at law number 2. Do unto others as you desire them to do unto you. Okay, if you desire people to respect you, to respect your opinion, to give you the freedom to make your decisions, then you have to start respecting them. Give them the freedom to be themselves, to make their choices. Now, everybody is gifted with freedom of choice, free will. Okay, irrevocable, even, at least in my belief, irrevocable even by the creator of whoever you believe. Okay, you've got free will, but you also have to realize that with that free will comes the responsibility to deal with the consequences of your choices. Okay, everybody's faced with the same set of decisions. You come to a point in your life where you have to go, this is what I desire. This is what I'm aiming for. Now, for me, it's a real simple issue. I look at it going, I'm not content with the way my world is. I'm not content with it at all. Now, I can either sit here and point the finger at everybody else, like I see so many people doing, and I can go, okay, it's all somebody else's fault. It's the people who have money that are to blame. Now, here's the thing. Okay, I have a choice. Okay, now I have a choice where I can turn around and this thing here, this little figure, okay, is $6. I had a choice. I could spend, okay, now I'm in Canada, so this is $6 Canadian. Okay, I had a choice. I could take that $6 and I could buy this item, or I could spend that $6 and grab a cup of coffee, okay, or grab 2 cups of coffee. The fact is, I chose to buy this. Therefore, I do not. I have to deal with the consequences of I can no longer buy the 2 cups of coffee that's what I paid for. Okay, my choice, my freedom. I chose to buy it. The consequence is I don't have the money to buy the coffee. Okay, you've got the same thing. Now, absolutely, choose the spiritual path you desire to be on. But remember, that choice comes with consequences. You can choose to be nice to people or you can choose to be mean to people. It's your call. But understand, if you choose to be nice to people, the odds are much better that they will do their best to be nice to you. Now, sometimes they will not recognize or they will not have had the experience of being nice. So they may be really, really, really rough around the edges on how to be nice. That sounds a little silly, but don't take my word for it. Test it out yourself. Take a look at the people that have been treated really poorly and ask yourself, did they really have an actual opportunity to learn how to be nice? An obvious example is take a look at people that have chosen to drink in excess or have chosen to take drugs. Now, most people call drugs things like, heroin, LSD is way back, but meth, you know, these are drugs that people talk about. But here's the problem. There's another drug. Okay. There is the drug of chaos. There is the drug of religion. Okay. If you are going to a place where people are telling you, where the people that you're turning to for guidance are saying, fear everybody around you. Okay, you look back to the beginning of the United States and Canada. Right now we're talking 200 years back. People were looking at it and going, oh, if they're black, they're evil. Okay. And you were taught to believe they were evil. Now, here's the thing. I remember my past lives. Now, in my past life, in 1860, um, 1760. Okay, in 1760, I was Caucasian. Okay, I lived in the deep south. But I lived in deep south. South. I was a plantation owner at that time. Now, here's the thing. Slavery was absolutely acceptable at that point to most people. Okay, and we were told that, the government told us we can get this cheap labor, we can buy these slaves and have them work for us. Well, here's the thing. The slaves came from over in Africa, most of them. There were other places, but that's where most of them came from. They were absolutely dark skinned. They were Negroid. Okay. And we were told as a population that that these people were less than what we were, and therefore we had this access to labor. They called it slavery. We would buy a person. Now here's the thing. Okay, this was acceptable. You don't have to like it. I certainly don't. Okay, but even then, we were told it was the way to go. And lots of people owned people, which, by the way, even then, I was against. However, with that in mind, I took a slightly different take. I did actually buy two people. Okay. Because at the time, I needed help and, people were not willing to work. Sound familiar? There's a lot of that going on right now. But I heard about one young lass that was over in Europe, and in this case, she wasn't actually black. She was white. But this gentleman was very much in dire straits and offered her for sale. Okay, now it did not go the way that you may be thinking. So I bought the first one. I bought her, and there was a dark skinned lady that came over with her. Okay. But I paid to have both of them brought over. But here's the way it went. Okay, I was told, you could number one, you couldn't pay a slave. A slave you bought. They didn't get wage. You had to keep a roof over their head. You had to keep food on the table. Okay, but you were responsible not only for their well-being, but you were responsible for their actions. Now, it was normal practice, and I know this probably upsets a lot of you. It was normal practice to beat slaves if they didn't do right. Of course, you got to remember, 20, 30 years ago, it was normal to spank your kids. But what people don't seem to understand is where they got the slaves from. They got it from Africa, but what most people don't realize or choose to ignore is that black people were selling black people to the white people. That's how they got the purchase. Now, this is a crash course in history, and you can go check out your own sources. Don't just take my word for it. The reason I brought this up is because, yes, I bought the first two. Okay. It didn't end up working out the way that people think. But I come home one day, and a couple of the workers that I was paying to work my fields, I come home and they were beating on this woman. They had her strung up, and they were whipping the daylights out of her. Okay. Well, what did I do? Now, it was normal. I could have gone, okay, she did something wrong. They're beating her. That's right. Only I took a slightly different perspective. Even then, I had the choice. I could have left it go, or I could choose to do something about it. So what did I do? I had the woman immediately cut down. Okay, had her taken down off the rack she was being strapped on, that she was being whipped on. I had her taken off and taken care of. Okay, then I turned around and had the guy that was actually beating her. Okay, I had him strung up and I whipped him myself. And my comment was simple: she's my property. By law, she is my property, and I will be danged if I'm going to let you damage my property. Okay. Well, word got around pretty quick. And over time, I ended up with a gentleman. It started with one gentleman that had run away from the plantation he was working on. And in the course of running away, he came across mine. And he had heard what had happened to the woman that had been whipped. He asked me, and I mean these are people that we were told were completely ignorant. They had no concept of anything. They were little more than animals, is what we've been told. And this gentleman looked at me and he goes, look, he says, I don't want to work there. I know I'm stuck. I know I'm a slave. I also know I heard you treat people in this way. And I went, yes. Okay, meanwhile, my own workers were going, let's get him out of here. We got to take him back. And I just held up my hand. I'm like, I want to hear this out. And the gentleman explained the problem. And I told him, I says, okay, I understand your problem. He goes, I would like to work for you. He says, I don't really like being a slave, but I know I am one. I know I'm stuck with it. But is there a way that you can take me on and I will serve out my indenturement? So I talked to him for a bit, and what he was saying to me was rational. Long and the short of it is, I went to the guy that owned him, explained the situation, offered to buy out the indenturement, buy out the contract, with a little bit of profit to him. And the deal was struck. I ended up with the slave. Okay. Now, I didn't buy the slave. What I did was I paid for the guy to let him go. Now, the other thing was we were not allowed to pay slaves. Okay, and let's just use this value. Okay, we were allowed to pay our slaves $1 a month. Or not our slaves, we were allowed to pay our employees. The going rate was $1 a month to work on the farm. But you couldn't pay slaves. They still had to do the same work. But the kicker to it was that at the end of their indenturement, we were allowed to give them a one-time fee, a one-time bonus, if you will. Whatever we chose, there was no limit on what it was. There was no minimum. We could give them. We were permitted at the end of their indenturement to give them a one-time chunk of money, and they'd be free to go. Of course, very few people wanted to hire a free slave. They wanted a slave they had control over. Well, there was no limit, so what I was doing was I'd go, okay, I'm paying my employees $1 a month, right? And I'm not allowed to pay the slave, but nobody said anything about what else I could do. So I took a jar, and that dollar that I was paying my employees, every slave I ended up with, I'd put the dollar in a bin marked for them. And when their indenturement came out, I would turn around and hand them that whole chunk of money. Now, if you think about it, 20 years at $1 a month, aka $12 a year, right? You're looking at $240. That's a good chunk of money to start with to get a life started. So I'd give them this, and they'd turn around and go, I'd be, okay, here's your one-time payment. You're done. You're free to go. And almost invariably, it was like, well, do I have to leave? I'd look at them and go, no, I don't care. So the only difference is if you want to stay working for me, I have to pay you every month now. Right. Okay, so that was fine. They decided not to leave. And they'd look at me and go, well, do we have to move out of our home? Why do I care where you live? You want to stay with the people, but understand, they are still under the same laws they've been under. You will get paid, they will not. Okay, but again, at the end of their indenturement, I do the same thing. Most of them would choose to stay with me, but I took it one step further. And again, slavery was normal. Okay, I did not agree with beating slaves ever. So what ended up happening is there were slaves that were running. And this is where the issue of respect, being true to yourself first came in. But you have to follow the laws of the land in which you are. And in this case, that meant those are slaves. I'm not allowed to pay them, but it doesn't say I have to beat them. It says I have to pay them. I have to treat them properly. Okay. Or more to the point, I have to take responsibility for their actions. And I'm responsible to make sure they're fed, make sure they're clothed. Okay. That was it. So I came up with an idea because there were always slaves getting away and running. So I developed a crew and I trained them. And I told everybody I trained them that these were people that would go and they would track down people. They would track down runners. And when they went and got them, I would get paid. and let's just put a number on it. I'd get paid $10 to return a slave, which really boiled down to almost a year's wage. I'd take them back. Now, here's the thing. I knew if I took them back, they would get beat. I knew this full well. I knew they'd run again. So I go, okay, here it is. I found him. I told you it was going to cost $10. Absolutely, it was. What you didn't tell me was the guy was going to be that much trouble. So it cost me X number of extra days, and here's the extra bill. You're going to pay it, or I'm not giving you your slave back. Well, the long and the short of it was I ended up with a lot of slaves that the owners didn't want to pay for. Sometimes they'd pay to take them back, and they would run a second time, at which point the price talked them down because now they're experienced. I would increase the price. That was what I had told people, and I ended up with a lot of slaves that way. And we'll use the term slaves because that's what the society said they were. They were black, they were slaves. Okay, but the same thing. Each of the new ones, I would start a bin for. But I developed another method. This, everything up until this point was absolutely legal. Okay, I didn't do anything wrong until I came to the understanding that some of the slaves couldn't run. They were still getting beaten. They were still getting tortured. I call it torture if you're stringing somebody up and beating them and hanging them there overnight. So I developed a second crew I didn't tell anybody anything about, except my own people, and they kept it quiet. I developed a crew that would go out and kidnap the tortured slaves. I would absolutely take them, of course. The owners would come to me going, look, I've got a runner. I don't know how he managed to run, but I've got a runner. So we'd go through the same routine. I'd send people off, and I will explain the rest of that because we're down to the end here, and I realize this has gone a really odd way. But the reality of it is, this is simply an issue of, following the law. I followed the law for the most part. Up until that point, absolutely. But this is where being true to yourself first comes in. Okay, is you have to look at the laws. If they do not make sense, there's going to be a problem. Okay, if laws do not apply to everybody, society is going to split. And right now, right here, right now, we have a choice. We can choose to work together to make this a better world, or we can choose to continue on the path it's been going on and watch it slowly, and not really all that slowly, fall apart. That call is up to you. Now, I will be back tomorrow, and I will absolutely carry this on and explain the tail end of it. There's not much more. It's just, this happens to be where I'm ending it, for the moment. And so when I come back tomorrow, we will talk to you then. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and for pity's sakes, stay positive.